What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Strive podcast. In today's episode, we spoke with Tobi Pearce. And you guys may know Tobi as the founder of Sweat with his partner Kayla, who just exited and sold the business for many hundreds of millions not that long ago. But today I didn't want to talk about the money. Sel and I wanted to talk to Tobi about the realities of business and media's current glorification of entrepreneurship and the real push for people to get into business. But we wanted to tell the truth. We wanted to share the struggles of business. We wanted to share the realities of business and, you know, give experiences that we've had and Tobi specifically in the journey. And we really wanted to provide value with this podcast. And as always, Tobi provided an immense amount of podcast. And hey, if you want to learn more about Tobi's journey, the journey of Sweat, the story about his exit and how he felt after the exit, there are so many amazing podcasts out there that I would highly encourage you to listen to that are all very recent. But in today's episode, we got deep and I really hope you guys get something out of it. Awesome, guys. Welcome to the Strive podcast and a huge welcome to Tobi Pearce. What's up, brother?
Oh, mate, lots of things happening at the moment, but just really happy to be here. Thanks for hosting me, guys.
Dude, so good to have you here. So good. Just reached out. Obviously, we've connected over jiu-jitsu and we've been training together, and we've obviously all got a mutual interest in business. And I was just talking to you over the net, and we're like, "Hey, come do this podcast." And
yeah, and that was mid rear naked strangle, right? So you'd taken my back, and you're like, "You're going to come on the podcast, man." I wasn't in a position to say no.
No, brother. Talk to us about, obviously I just want to start with the fact that you've just done a jiu-jitsu competition, you dominated this competition, but you left with basically no knee.
Yeah.
Talk us through that.
Yeah, I had a solid couple of rounds there for sure. I was actually in the first match, like it must have been, I don't know, 2 minutes or 2.5 minutes into the first match. I was playing around because I was in the gi as well, right? I never train in the gi anymore. I do like 2 or 3 like gi matches a year. Yep. Anyway, I'm doing stand up and sort of lunged to go for a takedown, and must have not lunged that well. Sort of tore my ACL, like fully ruptured my ACL, tore my meniscus, and damaged the hamstring a little bit. But it was one of those moments in my head, kind of quite challenging. I was like, oh, I've definitely really badly hurt myself. Should I just kind of give up? And I was like, oh, nah, like I'm here already. I may as well. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
Can't get worse. That's the one thing. At least you go.
Exactly. Like what's going to happen? Like,
exactly.
I've torn 80% or 1090, or if it's snapped, it's like, that might do other injuries. But so I spent that was right at the beginning of the day, and I spent the rest of the day basically starting a match sitting down because couldn't really take down because I couldn't stand up on one leg properly. But yeah, did it right. Yeah, had a couple of wins.
It really is like a ridiculous concept, like what we do, hey, and the fact that you've literally just gone to this competition to face another man and wrestle. You've torn your knee, but yet you still continue on.
Well, it's an interesting thing, right? And so because jiu-jitsu is a unique martial art for a variety of reasons, and anyone who does that or has been doing it for a while knows. But I think it's even more strange to people that have kind of no exposure to it or awareness to it, right? Because if you say to any kind of normal person in the street, you go, oh, hey, like, how many people do you know that do boxing? And they're like, oh, yeah, a couple. And it's like, okay. And how many times have they been punched in the head? And they're like, oh, all the time. And I'm like, well, why is that? And like, well, that's the objective of boxing, to punch and, well, ideally not get punched and, do the punching, right? And they go, cool. So then you say, well, in jiu-jitsu, the goal is to break someone's limbs or to, make them unconscious, right? From chokes and strangles, right? So, but the intensity or, kind of the damage that's done is like if you get punched in the face, the likelihood that you're going to have an extreme outcome's not as high. You can get punched in the head quite a few times, generally speaking, and again, I'm speaking quite broadly, right? But you can get punched in the head a bit and you'll be all right. If someone, goes to put a heel hook on you and yanks it and you don't tap, you are not going to be all right. You like say goodbye to your MCL or LCL or both or whatever, right? So the kind of intensity and severity of the injuries in the sport is extreme.
It's funny. I heard your kids in the background, like whilst we were rolling, and I was all, and I've had my kids come and watch me roll as well, and it's one of those weird ones. I've also had my parents come. It's much worse with the parents, particularly my mum. She doesn't know what's going on. She's just going, what is this? Yeah. Why are you rolling around on the ground for no apparent reason on a Sunday? And then Ellis at the time was just like screaming. He doesn't know what he's screaming at. Obviously, then you're choking someone and then you choke someone out and then people clap and you get up and you get your hand raised. And then so in his head, he's just like, oh, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And you're like, only in this environment, only in these, in this part. But then you leave that setting where everyone knows the rule set and what's going on. You're like, you don't do that to other people. But then you're also trying to teach them that there was a level of respect in that. There was a level of competition. There was a level of grit.
Yep.
All these really good things. I'm trying to get him to compete end of this year. And then I'm just looking in his eyes. He's like, are you talking about where you were just choking someone? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, could that happen to me? I'm like, 100%. He's like, I don't know.
You secretly want it to happen to him.
And I'm just like, it's a strange thing, as you said, because if you just talk to the common person about it, their concept of why that's occurring isn't there. But when you're actually doing it, it makes all the sense in the world. So it's just like you said, crazy, unique sport in that aspect.
Now, bro, there's so many people listening to this going, oh, come on, guys, get through this. I don't really care about jiu-jitsu. I want to, you know. So this is where I'm sort of getting to, because I think it's like kind of gets to sort of what we're going to start talking about. But, you know, a lot of people out there would be going, you know, Tobi's had some business success. Why is he putting himself in this situation to do jiu-jitsu? Like, you should be doing something else. So what drew you to jiu-jitsu, and what keeps you sort of practicing in the art?
Yeah, so I've always been a big believer that discomfort is a good thing, right? Or adversity. And most people, when they think adversity, they think like bad stuff. But I think adversity can just be challenges. You know, they can be positive challenges, you know, to you, right? So I've always been a big believer in that, though, and that's kind of how we grow. And so if that's true, if you took an extreme view, you know, you kind of can't grow or develop without some discomfort or adversity or challenges, well, then you would go, if you were living a life that didn't have a lot of that in it, then you should create a life that has that in it, right? And I don't mean deliberately go hurt your knee so you can rehab it, right? Obviously, but you know, so for me, the important context was that I'm trying to remember when it was. I would have been like, you know, early to mid 20s, and had been running a business, and so I'd come out of, you know, my 4-year journey was sort of like a homeless teenager, or kind of like left home, somehow ended up, you know, running my own sort of small PT business. Couple of years later, it was, you know, running a business that was turning over $10-15 million a year incredibly profitably. And I was like, I've been really fortunate to have had that journey. Now I'm running a business and I have a team of people around me that look at me as a leader and this and that and the other. So in other words, I'm always in control and I'm always the decision maker, and the yes or no stops with me, et cetera, because we hadn't really established as like a proper corporate at this point. You were sort of startup still, right? And so I was like, in my friendship circle, I'm like, you know, I was one of the more successful, you know, kind of in control, this, that, and the other. And I'm like, that's a really dangerous place to be. You know, and so I recognize, I'm like, that's an incredibly dangerous place to be. I need to be putting myself into different types of environments where I'm, you know, not the best or not kind of the leader or a superior in one, you know, format, right? And so I was like, oh, look, generically, I'll just dive into a couple of random things. So I was like the snow, I'm going to go snowboarding. And I'm going to do one day of snowboarding, and then I'm going to jump out a helicopter and snow in a random mountain, which I soon discovered was a terrible idea. But, you know, I did that. And then at the same time, I was like, oh, you know, I've always really had this, I've really just really loved and respected martial arts, but I never really bothered to do it. So I was like, I'll do it. And I tried MMA for a bit, and I did that, but I didn't really like the idea of like punching and elbowing people in the head. That didn't really sit with me that well. And then the jiu-jitsu component of that I found quite interesting. And so that's kind of, sort of ended up unintentionally in there.
And just like talking about the connections that you build through there, like obviously we've built a connection through there. Cell and my connection was built through there. Then we ended up starting businesses together. And I think that is just like probably, if anything, one of the most special parts of something like a martial arts is the community and the human need for us to be connected to some sort of community and feeling part of something bigger. And I think the thing about jiu-jitsu as well is that like no matter where you go in the world, you know, it's a language. So even if you travel to Japan or something and you're not speaking the same language, you do through jiu-jitsu. So there's a connection there. Yeah. I think that's a beautiful thing. So it's like...
Yeah, no, and I mean, I just went to ADCC, right? And so had some amazing experiences and was able to connect and reconnect with people. Like I I happened to go to school, like I went to high school with Craig Jones.
Yep.
Oh, nice.
So for any single person who knows anything about jiu-jitsu and has been involved, just going like, oh my God, I feel so sorry for you. But I was able to, kind of reconnect with him and a few people. And then when I'm over there, I didn't really know anyone in the community and kind of left there with probably another 10, 20 new really cool friends, getting on the mats and rolling around together. Yep. So
I think it's also cool in the aspect that you would attest to this. As you said, you're a leader. You've climbed the corporate ranks, sold businesses for hundreds of millions of dollars. You could walk into our gym or your gym in Adelaide, and for all that you've done outside of there, it only matters what you do in there.
It's an equalizer, right?
It's an equalizer. And I think it's even harder in today's world to get those equalizers. Like the gap of disparity has grown further and further. Not saying like the rich are getting richer or the poor are getting poorer, but there's this social media world, there's this whole lot of fake smoke and all these different things that go on. People feel like they can't get their dues, but at the same time, if you go into a place like that, you get what you get. You get the aspect of someone has been here training for 10 years, 15 years, and they'll hold respect for their
and
time.
There's no lies.
There's no lies.
There's no faking, no lies.
Exactly. And it feels like, honestly, that when I go there for my hour and a half of a morning, rarely get there of an arvo, so I just do everything in the morning. It feels like that's the one place where there's complete truth. There isn't any bullshit. There isn't anything. People are there to help each other get better. If you've been skipping classes, you'll get found out quickly. If you haven't done the work, you'll get found out quickly. If you have been doing the work, you'll get rewarded as well for that. So feel it's an easy thing to gravitate towards when there is so much fluff that appears everywhere else in the world.
It's the social media generation, right? Like, and you see this a lot. Like, obviously, I spent a huge portion of my career in the fitness industry, right? And there's a lot of to put it lightly, there's a lot of good-looking people that make a lot of money by being good-looking.
Yeah.
By that, and that's not a good thing, a bad thing. It's just a thing.
It's a thing.
It is what it is, right? But I think one of the awesome things about martial arts in general, and obviously jiu-jitsu being one of them, is that there's not really a lot of kind of predisposed advantage that you can get going into it. Sure, like longer limbs are better for this type of game, and maybe a bit of strength is better for that type of game. But the reality is, like, you're in weight divisions, you're in skill and belt divisions, typically speaking. So like it's quite a normalized competitive set if you're competing, obviously. So there's not really a lot that goes into it that is outside of your control in that sense, right? Like you either do or don't train, do or don't study. That's it. It's pretty raw.
Yeah, feel that.
I feel like, we've got our little bit of selfish fulfillment out of having this jiu-jitsu chat, but the reality is that we almost have like a submission where we want people and we want to encourage people to get into martial arts because we think it is just so beneficial for every phase in life, right? And everything that you're doing, and to build so many qualities that you need to attack this life that's tough, life is tough. But, when we were talking on over Instagram and stuff like that, and we were just having a general chat, we were going down this theme, and we were discussing about how media right now glorifies entrepreneurship. And, literally I was on Instagram before, and I've heard Gary Vee sort of encouraging that you go out and start a business right now. And, he's quite an influential figure when he talks about promoting starting a business and hustles and all this sort of stuff. And, we've all started businesses and you've had some incredible successes, but I thought that this would be an awesome opportunity to talk to you specifically about the reality of running a business. And I want to hear from you whether you think running a business should be something that everyone considers, or whether it's something that only a select few should consider. What's your general sort of thoughts about that statement, and whether you think business is for everyone?
Yeah, so I think the short answer is probably that it's not for everybody, and that's in many ways, to the Gary V's of the world, or a variety of other kind of influential business life coach figures online. That's probably quite confronting. It's quite abrasive. And what I really say when I mean that is let's create a spectrum. At one end is that you're probably your default emotional and intellectual aptitudes, experiences and knowledge either really don't align to running an organization, or really do align to running an organization. And if we imagine that's a spectrum, everyone falls somewhere on that spectrum, either more or less kind of in favor of things that are going to make them more or less likely successful. I think the reason why I kind of answer with a bit of a binary response, as in like no, not everyone is kind of appropriate or meant for business, is that, well, the reality is that if you rephrased it and said, could any person be right to run a business at some point in their life? The answer is potentially yes.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
But the reality is that life is quite dynamic and augments and changes obviously a lot throughout time. And so if you're someone who has kind of default personality, values, beliefs, and attitudes or whatever that doesn't necessarily align to that set that's needed to run a business, and your life is in a particular point where it would really be kind of inconceivable or irrational for you to do so, then it's just not a good idea.
Yeah.
And so I think this kind of theme or
this narrative.
Yeah, the narrative and the ideology that's like perpetuated online is almost this kind of like misinterpretation and extrapolation of, like positive psychology or growth mindset, right? It's like, well, you can be whatever you want.
Yeah. And
it's like, well, no, you can't actually.
Yeah.
Right? I can't be 6'7" and then go and play basketball like LeBron, no matter how hard I try.
Yeah.
I can get better at basketball, right? And I could potentially be okay. But the probability is quite low that I'll ever be that good for a variety of naturally inherited attributes, that I do or don't have, right? Yeah. Obviously, business is a little different. There's not as many kind of physical characteristics that are limiters when you go into it, but there's a variety of other kind of things that you're either pre-exposed to or not that massively determine the probability to succeed. But it's a very like all kind of good questions and topics, right? It's a very nuanced topic. It's not as simple as anyone can go start a business, go and do it.
Yeah,
there's so much more to it than that.
I think to that matter, and I don't know enough about your background, but I can say if someone has torn their ACL and is willing to keep fighting through that, they're probably suited to business in some manner. Not categorizing what the business is. It could be in fashion, it could be in music, could be art, could be finance, but they've got something within them that they've built or they were born with. That's another topic that allows them to push through a lot to get to an end result. Right here, right now, and even more so in this world, there is less and less people that are willing to push through adversity to get to an end result. And at the end of the day, every business will have a shitload of adversity. So much of it.
Discomfort thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. So much of it.
It's so true. And I think also as well, like one of the things, I'm kind of like a passionate realist or objectivist, if you will. Like I believe that to the best of my ability today, I try to see the world as it is and exist in the world as I am, if that kind of makes sense, right? And so, the reality is that I think this notion of like, what is an entrepreneur? What is a business? What and why am I doing it? I think those three simple statements of questions, right? Like you could spend an eternity kind of debating that. Like I would suggest, just off the top, right? I would suggest that more often than not, people like the idea of being an entrepreneur more and the potential future outcome of what being an entrepreneur could get them. They like them more than actually doing what is necessary to be an entrepreneur, right? So in other words, identifying as one is exciting. Being one, they have no interest in.
Yeah.
Right. But social media allows you to kind of identify how you want, socially and publicly, right?
I think the thing as well is that we don't talk often enough about what it is about being an entrepreneur. And I think that's what I've become. I don't know whether my thoughts on this are going to evolve over time and as I become more experienced in life and in business, but I feel quite protective about this sort of, narrative at the moment. And I was thinking, and I was talking to Holly last night about when you first start business, you go through this thing where you become kind of good at something, right? And then you want to tell the world about it. And then, so I remember just, going through this phase where I was like, everyone should start their business and just being like super encouraging and doing videos on YouTube about building marketing funnels and doing all these sorts of things. 8 years later, today I sit there going, oh my God, literally the struggles that Sel and I go through every single day that people would have no idea about, and the gravity of the decisions that we need to make that either determine whether tomorrow we have a house or not. And the pressures and stress is just so great that even with what I've been through in my life, and I know what Sel's been through in his life, these things can rattle you. And we consider ourselves quite strong, people. And I just feel for those who are sort of make the decision or are thrust out into that business world when they're not ready. Maybe they're going to learn, and maybe they need to learn that the hard way.
Well,
it's like,
it may be right, but the public, I guess the public view here, or the view about entrepreneurship is incredibly inaccurate socially, in the sense that people go, oh, it's really all about hard work.
Yeah.
And then you go, okay, well, what's the hard work? And they go, oh, lots of hours, hustle. It's this like hustle nation narrative, right? But the number of hours that you work is kind of like the almost a non-existent problem.
Yeah.
The real problem is exactly, to the discussion here. The real problem with entrepreneurship is the emotional confrontation, the frequency and the intensity of it. It's not how many hours you work, because you can work 60 to 80 hours a week at a corporate and be under plenty of pressure and stress just to deliver the work, right? But when you are doing that 60 to 80 hours, that's to get your salary and paycheck. You're not worried about losing your life savings, or you're not worried about, for some people it's like losing money, or it's being a public failure, or it's regressing in life, or whatever it is, right? There's typically different fears and concerns, but the intensity of doing it kind of on your own is just unmatched, in any other kind of approach to generating an income, right? Entrepreneurship kind of on the one end, and employment on the other, if you will.
Yeah.
They definitely paint this picture of recent time. It's almost every time I open up YouTube, it's that person like, do you want to work for yourself? Do you want to earn millions of dollars? And then it just B-rolls to like you in a boat and a yacht doing all these things. And so they pan to an outcome. But I wonder how many people would really want to do it if they pan to the actual realization of you'll be sitting by yourself, lonely for massive, massive periods of time. Maybe not lonely, but feel like you're on an island. And all these aspects are reliant on you. And noting, if someone said to you, you have a decision to make, and you know what the right decision is, and it's going to piss off 95% of people, and they may never talk to you again. They may be off you. You'll lose friends. You'll lose family. Would you do it still? Most people would say no. Most people would,
because that's the reality.
But that's what's going to happen. I can tell you for a fact. There's people that are good friends that I had to make a decision. It was the best decision of the interest of the business, and for that sake, it was the best decision in the interest of my family. I haven't spoken to them. I've said this is the decision, and this is why I had to make the decision. Complete rationale, like it's A plus B will equal to C for this, and we have to do this. But then they have emotions tied to it. Yeah. And I'm like trying to explain to them, your emotions in this case are not my problem. Yeah. The business is my problem, and that's what I have to protect. That's led to fallouts.
Yeah, and even if you are compassionate and empathize with them in that process, you can't control the response.
No.
So you can, as in the things that sit within your control, what is the choice you make? How do you deliver the message for that? And then how can you support the person after? They can always still turn around and say, well, I'm out, screw you, and you've just ruined my life. And that's a practical reality. There's been times in my journey where I've done similar things, right? There was a particular person who, had moved location, to come work for me in a part of the journey, and they'd bought like a family house, just put their kids in private school, got on a big mortgage. Their wife was no longer working because she was wanted to be a stay-at-home mum up until the kids kind of started the school that they got into, all lots of expensive stuff. And literally, like at the end of that conversation, I have to then go, cool, thanks for telling me about what's going on in your life, but you actually don't have a future here at this company.
Yeah.
And and so some people might say, well, that makes you a terrible person. And other people would say, well, that's a very obvious business decision if they're not performing.
Yeah.
But there's no kind of comfortable route here. And so push kind of comes to shove over time. And obviously, Miles, you and I chat a bit. I work with quite a few founders now. And one of the things that a lot of them kind of seem to misunderstand in that particular scenario is it's like, well, the business's success is your success, inevitably, for most of these people. So in a scenario like that, you're choosing between the performance of the individual to support them in their life, or you're choosing between the performance of the organization and supporting it, right, which is your life as a proxy. But they don't realize that they make tens or hundreds or even thousands of these decisions in a month, and they don't realize that subconsciously they avoid a lot of them because it's easier for them to kind of, and I always say this, it's like, hard today, hard tomorrow type scenario, right? You can have a hard conversation today, or you can deal with their poor attitude and poor performance tomorrow. Like, what way do you want to go? And there's founders often go through this process and they make so many decisions they just get fatigued, and they either subconsciously or consciously kind of avoid them, and to perpetuate their own narrative that I'm still an owner, I'm still successful, I'm still going on, but then they're not really. The issue is that eventually the poor performance catches up.
Yeah. Something you mentioned just then that made me laugh is that aspect of like a choice fatigue, like a decision fatigue.
For sure.
And I hear people like going, I don't know what I want to have for lunch. I'm like, in my head, I'm just like, there's not even an option of what to have for lunch. Just whatever's in the fridge that I'm walking past, that I've just chucked everything I possibly can in there, because you reduce your decision making that you have to do, because the big decisions you have to do are the ones that count. And that's one thing I definitely know about people that have talked about to me going, oh, I want to start my own business. I'm like, cool. Like, what do you think? And they'll say this, this, and this. And I'll hear them and I'll listen to them. And I'm like, I can tell you struggled to even work out what shoes you were going to wear today. How do you conceptualize, think you're going to make, they don't realize it, but probably daily 200 or 300 decisions. Like almost every minute is like a decision that has to be made, and it's going to be a right or a wrong one. And if you made the wrong one, then you're going to have to make probably 5 more decisions to fix that at some time point down the track. And that decision fatigue, like, is one of those things where I sit there, I see Miles go through it sometimes, where he's just like going to people, I don't care. Like, it's just at the point where he's like, I don't want to make another decision today because I'm up to my 400 decision. You choose and I'll deal with whatever happens there. But I just want some decisions to be made that don't end up coming straight back to me.
There's an element of me like trying to encourage them to make the decision, because I think there's just this default where people feel so comfortable just continuing to ask questions that it becomes...
It's a cultural thing, right? Yeah. As in, so like in your business, for example, right, it's like, it's like one of the things that I was like kind of really hot on. I was like, never come to me with a problem. Don't want to hear it. I only want to know about what suggestions do you have for solutions, and which one are you recommending to me and why? Right, exactly. Because if we come back to the whole decisions thing, however many you make in a day, right, the success, however you choose to define success, right, the success of your life that you have in any particular activities or endeavors, including business, will ultimately almost exclusively come down to the quality of your decisions, right? Which is really interesting, because how many people do you know that proactively focus on learning and critically analysing their decision making?
Not many.
But I only know a few, and funnily enough, those few people are the ones who are incredibly successful in whatever endeavours they take. So, how are you focusing on decision making? And then to the employee culture thing in the business, well, what types of controls and governance do you have in place to make sure that you have to make the least amount of decisions, and that your decisions will be the largest and have the most impact, and are decisions that can only be made by you with the specific skills and knowledge that you have, right? And so, because that means then, cool, I'm pushing all the decisions that other people can otherwise make, I'm pushing them down or across in the organization, and all the ones that are massive, high value, that are multifactorial and very complex, that only I can answer because of my special kind of subject matter knowledge or expertise, whatever that might be for the individual. How do I make sure that I'm doing as many of those as possible? Because that's the real value, right? And this is kind of this like one of the like founders' dilemmas, right? At what point in time do you recruit people to take decisions away from you, and how do you commercially rationalize that? Because there's always a degree of risk that the decisions will be bad, but then how do you implement governance and controls or frameworks or whatever to make sure that those decisions happen well, and when you need them and where you need them, kind of without you being present, so that you can focus on kind of what's next. Right.
I've always struggled with that, for sure. That's it sounds easy when you say it, but it's not. It's not easy. It's a skill that you need to develop.
It absolutely is. And like trying to actually understand as well, like I say this all the time, like one of the easiest places to start is, like, why are we here for today for this meeting? So like if this meeting is kicked off and you can't say to me, I have this particular agenda and the agenda's created because the purpose of this meeting is this, and based on that purpose, these are the 2 or 3 or 4 things that I need to get out of it. It's like, you don't deserve my time then.
Yeah.
I will not allocate my time because you don't need me. What am I contributing? If not a decision or if not feedback, then what am I kind of contributing here?
Yeah. Do you think that, like, particularly in decision making, and as you said, I think it's the most important thing that anyone can learn. It's not something, you don't go to school and they go, hey, today's class is on decision making. There's English, there's maths, there's all these different types of things that have decision making wrapped up into them, but there's not a definite like do this equals X. Do you think, and because you have kids, you probably have a good answer to this, that there's an aspect of you need to let people make decisions early within their lives to be able to understand the consequence of making wrong decisions, still safeguarding them enough that it's not dangerous. I've been told that I'm too reckless, like in the aspect of
think, and I think I save people too much.
So there could be two aspects. Like if you're too reckless, someone could seriously make a decision that really fucks them up.
It's a complex thing, right? So if you look at, we'll go from a few different ways, right? So if you look at the kids thing, well, let's go back to adversity 101, right? If you want to learn, if you want to get really good at being able to take care of yourself if you're uncomfortable, then you need to expose yourself to being uncomfortable.
Exactly.
In any way, shape or form. Redundant what or how or when. It's just, if you want to get good at winning or succeeding or kind of triumphing over adversity, then you must have regular exposure to it. Which is why a trend, not the rule, right, but a trend is that a lot of successful business owners are people that had kind of adversity or whatever early in life because they developed skills at, critical thinking and independence and this sort of stuff, right? If we kind of, raise the age scale and we jump into, let's say, early adulthood, 20s plus, right? And then we'll relate it back to business, right? There's an interesting nuance here because, cool, yes, we should let you try and fail things, but what? Because most of, and I say this kind of, again, I say this all the time to founders, I'm like, at least 80 to 90% of what you do in your business today and 80 to 90% of what you need to do in your business between now and when you sell it or it dies or you get out of it and you employ management, 80 to 90% of everything you need to do in your business has already been done by someone, is being done somewhere probably bigger, better, faster, smarter, whatever. So why would you waste time learning and breaking things when the answers are already there?
Yeah.
And then for the bit, the 10 or 20% that hasn't been done or you're doing differently or whatever, then that's where it's worthwhile to spend time actually iterating and learning. For example, if you take, a physical goods business, entering another country, it's like, okay, well, there are frameworks for go-to-market entry, go-to-market research, market identification, market selection, market analysis. Don't invent a framework. Use one. The only one. Google it, if you need to, right? If you want to understand how international, distribution, supply chains and logistics work, read about it. Mm-hmm. Most of the answers are there. If you want to do it better, then you have to think about it. But if you're just looking for a kind of a solution to X, a lot of the answers exist, right? So in the role of management and leadership, right? So leadership, know what are the right things to do. Management, get things done right. Okay, so as we look at that, the leadership component of that is, well, what things should we actually be focusing on in management? Well, what is the right way to do certain things? And so if you know that the things you're doing have already been done, find the answers. If not, then risk being wrong, because there's actually a worthy return. Otherwise, you're, and this is quite a blunt statement, because otherwise you're being pretty inefficient. Yeah. You're wasting energy if you want to go back to martial arts, right? Wasting energy, right? Yeah.
I love this, and there's so much value. I want to bring it back down to, those who are watching social media and looking at these things, and they're sitting as an employee in a job, and they're being pressured to start their own business, and then so internally they start feeling inadequate, and they start building this anxiety around this narrative that you should go and live your dream and do something you're passionate about. And then it becomes this whole dilemma where, but I don't know what I'm passionate about, and I don't know, how to live my dream, and I don't know how to start this business and all these sorts of things. This is literally, it's something that I feel protective on, and something that I see a lot, even within my own team, where it's like they're just under so much pressure because of what they're being fed.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here on this side being the business owner and just going, I don't think you want this. It's so often that I sit there and go, God, it would be so much easier if I was designed to be an employee.
Yeah.
And, there's all this messaging out there that says, if you want wealth and if you want balance in life, be a business owner. I actually quite think it's the opposite to a certain degree.
Yeah.
I think that you can achieve balance and you can quite easily build wealth being a great employee, where there's a huge chance, a greater chance than not, that you're not going to build wealth with the business, and you're certainly not going to have balance.
Well, all of this, ultimately, the whole conversation comes back to incongruence, right? And when I say that, what I mean is that there's an incongruence between what a person sees himself as and what they actually are.
Yep.
Right? There's an incongruence between what it is they want and the things that they are willing to do. That is the absolute baseline here, right? So if we were kind of super cut and dry about it, it's like what people do or don't consume on social media is their own problem, right? You can unfollow whenever you like.
Yep. You
can unsubscribe, turn the TV off, do whatever you want, right? So let's bring it back to kind of like innate human behavior. As human beings, typically speaking, we want more than we have.
Yep.
Right? That creates that is a belief or an attitude, right? That is incredibly self-destructive and self-deprecating,
yep.
right? If you want to get really wealthy really quick, want nothing.
Yep.
Right? Because wealth is simply surplus, having more than you need, right? And so most people go, I make 50K a year, I need 75. You're already poor. You are instantly poor, right? Because of the mindset that you said, unless I have 75K, then I'm not good enough, or I'm not winning, or I can't afford this lifestyle or whatever. Now, to be clear, there's obviously some practicalities. I have to have this much money to send my kids to school and drive and eat, and of course, sure. But the kind of break even for that point of, survivability versus kind of like thriving or achieving what you want is actually a lot lower than what most people think, right? So people very often they start from a position of like, I'm not who I want to be, and then so the anxiety sets in. Well, I believe I am this. Why aren't I achieving that? In the future, I might not. Obviously, anxiety by definition just being worrying about something in the future, right, outside of this current point in time. So then, the logical next step would be, well, if you know what you want, then so even if we think it's a bad goal or otherwise, let's just assume that that's what we want. There's an incongruence between who we are today and who we want to be. Let's accept that. Awesome. Well, what needs to be done to get there? Oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to endure that. Oh, I'm afraid of failure, which is where this whole like kind of narrative around fear of failure comes in. It's like, well, then maybe you don't want it because wanting something more comes with risk. Like inherently, there are not many free lunches, so to speak, right? Normally things come with a cost or a risk or a sacrifice, however you choose to kind of phrase that, right? And so people don't want to commit what is necessary, and you see this in all aspects of life. Oh, I want a really great relationship. I want to get married. I want to be in love. It's like, cool. Well, that requires a lot of patience, a lot of time, a lot of sacrifices, a lot of shitty conversations. Everyone goes, oh, but great relationships don't have shitty conversations. Absolutely, they do.
Yep.
As a matter of fact, I'd almost go so far as to say, if you want a great relationship, you are obliged to have shitty conversations.
Yep.
Oh, I want to be healthy and fit and look good for summer. Well, you probably got to eat good food and get in the gym. Oh, no, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Or I want to be an entrepreneur and I want to have more money and financial freedom. It's like, oh, I don't want to do the work and deal with the uncertainty. So there's all these incongruences that kind of present themselves, everywhere, right? The pattern remains the same.
Do you guys think that because of this social media rise and what is deemed as an entrepreneur based on what people see in a phone is completely skewed? Give you an example. My dad is probably the best entrepreneur I know by terms of trade, in terms of started with nothing, came here from Africa with a shirt on his back, drove taxis, cleaned dishes, cleaned hotels, went to uni, got a PhD, started an engineering business, highly successful, exited, retired, lives in Hope Island, drives a golf buggy. That to me is like the ultimate, like in terms of entrepreneur, the best. What if someone pictured an entrepreneur in their head today would be the complete opposite of that? Life coach in Bali, typing on a computer, do better, try more, you're the best, some other randomized insert quote here type of situation, working for themselves, isn't tied to anything or whatever it may be, and then that is the new concept of what it is, which to me is like,
and there's probably a high chance they don't even make money.
Exactly.
Or they're just highly in debt.
To that point, and then how would they exit? Like, for example, that person, I'm just using that, and I'm not saying that's what what is being referred to, but there is definitely a level of, if you're a tradesperson, you've got your own building company, you're slogging it out, people don't think of you as an entrepreneur for whatever reason. And I'm referring to people, refer it to me, Miles, yourself, and maybe it's because we did something digital and you did something in an app, and so it's very, very on trend and sexy. So people are like, oh, Tobi's like this massive entrepreneur, and Miles owns a digital agency and a e-commerce business, and Sel has this kids nutrition or whatever it may be. Whereas I feel like the real other like proper entrepreneurs don't even get looked at, and they're the ones doing all this stuff. But because they don't live in a phone, when they're not seen on this digital platform, it's just like people dismiss it. Like it's almost like they don't exist.
Well, it's the status thing, right?
Yeah, well,
like
probably is more to that. Yeah, like you said.
Well, yeah. What if you just kind of like get the word entrepreneur and just bin it for a sec?
Yeah.
Right. What would you call all those people?
Exactly.
Well,
hard workers.
You call them a variety of things like that. You just say, well, you're a business person.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and if you said to people, you know, like, because the origin of the word entrepreneur, really frustrated. I can't remember exactly what his name was. Gene Singh, I think it was, saying he's a French guy, right? You know, going back a long time ago. And literally was just somebody who moves resources from one underperforming area to another high-performing area. There's resource efficiency. But that's the origin. That's, you know, etymologically speaking, that's the origin, right? You know, so if that's true, and not that all words remain the same and must remain the same, you know, over time, but it's like the current kind of definition, you know, that's socially accepted, well, firstly, people couldn't even articulate it. They wouldn't know what it is. But, you know, secondarily, like it doesn't really have a lot to do with that. You know, it starts with, you know, entrepreneur, cool.
Yeah.
Like that's the beginning of the definition.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. And this will probably make sure I never win this award. Or I did win it, but now I like look at it, and we were just at the Young Entrepreneur Awards, and we were going like they're going through the categories and all this different types of stuff. And the people I respected there the most were the people that I knew were just like straight, solid, hardworking, no bullshit about them, weren't doing anything for any other reason than they were doing their best to really enlift their community. Like they had they had some resources, and they were using those resources to do better, really effectively. And a commercial outcome sometimes was the result of that. Other times they would lose money off the back of that, but they felt so strongly and passionately about what they were doing. That's what mattered to them. It wasn't the status of an entrepreneur title. It wasn't the status of, I get to say on the gram or whatever it is, I've got this. It was like, I've changed lives by delivering this product or this service, which I find if it could be brought back to that, it would be amazing. And if more people can do that, that's great. But I find because of this shift, less people are looking at it on how it will affect or improve people's lives, and more how it will make them look to the outside world for their personal brand or whatever you want to call that other side of.
I guess that's just human nature, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and entrepreneurship should ultimately be about contribution, not
exactly.
Celebrity.
That's the biggest one.
That's
man.
the cut through. Right?
That is by far the biggest one. Is what are you doing with your business that will positively impact the people around you, communities around you, families, your legacy, your future generations, the people that come after you. And I find if you ask that to most people that said, I want to start a business, they haven't thought of that. And if they have, they don't really care.
That's the biggest takeaway from this right now.
Yeah. It's and that's by far the hardest thing. That it's easy. I'll use our marketing agency where we spent years trying to define what we did, and we did marketing, but that wasn't enough. Like it was like, how are we developing a service that can better the world? And then it became, we're a health and wellness digital business or incubator or accelerator that delivers better products to improve the quality of life of people in a longer format. So then we could feel good about doing what we were doing. And then we've delivered on those outcomes. If we were just people, and we know heaps of people that are in this space that just do shit to make money.
What's the purpose and meaning, right?
What is the purpose and meaning? Why bother?
And it's a fascinating thing. Like I do like a lot of kind of strategic reviews, or help like founders along their journey at varying points. Kind of normally they're doing a couple of million a year in revenue. If I'm working with them, all the way up to hundreds, right? And you'd be really surprised at how many organizations cannot answer this question in one sentence. Why does your company exist?
Yep.
Or what is the purpose of your organization? And I can confidently say, I reckon I've only had like a few people out of all the people I've spoken to who can answer it. And even the ones that can answer it, because they've got a strategic framework and they've spent some time kind of discussing it, more often than not, it's not crisp, it's not coherent. And even if it is, you go, cool. So if I walked into your office today and I lined up 10 staff, any 10 random staff, and I asked them, would they have the same answer? Right? And so, like, if the purpose of strategy is obviously like alignment, it's communication, decentralized decision making, et cetera, et cetera. If everyone in your organization doesn't know your purpose, or you don't, like, how can you possibly be effective?
One of the biggest things that we do in our agency is these brand labs where we help businesses align and uncover what their brand purpose is.
Yeah.
And a large portion of that is sort of, helping them understand that businesses that are more impactful or more influential. And I think it's more and more important in a day like in an environment that we're in right now, where there is just so much out there. There's so much noise. So people are gravitating towards brands that have an impact. They're aligning with brands that have an impact. And I think that that's so important. And I think that it's this extra thought that, you don't necessarily have immediately when you're thinking about starting a business. Some do.
Yeah.
Some businesses are started from a passion, about the impact that they want to have on the world or whatever it might be. And that's what
or they're just resolving a problem or doing something better. And a lot of the time, because, again, like, more founders than not are, product people.
Yep.
Right? They have a product or a service, a product or a service that they have that they do better because they didn't like the way that it was done before. That's a really kind of easy way of looking at it, right? And purely based on that, if you go like, well, what's the purpose of your organization? Especially really early on, they go, oh, I just really didn't like the way this was done, so I just did it better. Now, that might not be the organization's kind of enterprise contributions to society, but that was the inception or the genesis of the journey, right? Like, that was why it started. And then this was, again, very similar to myself and Sweat. Like, very early on in the journey, we're just like, oh, it's terrible that fitness for women is pitched this way. Like, you must have six-pack abs, and if you don't, you can get them in 4 weeks, right? And you should look this way aesthetically and that, and and so on and so forth. Like, oh, firstly, that's terrible, right? Secondly, most of the fitness programs that are created at that point are either created for guys or they're just outright kind of boring and not that enjoyable. So it's like, oh, we should fix that. Like, we didn't sit there, day one and go like, oh, we exist to empower women with fitness.
Yeah.
Which was our company purpose later on, which then evolved to empower everybody with fitness. Yep. Right? So we didn't sit there starting with it. It was just like, well, these things look wrong. We want to fix them. Like, we're passionate about fixing them. And then the sophistication happens as the evolution continues over time, obviously. But everyone kind of starts with some general idea, or most product and service people start with some general idea, or this is wrong or not good enough, or I could do it better type scenario, which is, one of those kind of core attitudes that segments kind of, an entrepreneur from an entrepreneur, if you will, right? Most entrepreneurs don't want to be entrepreneurs. They just want to do stuff better.
Yep.
They just want to contribute, or they want to do cool stuff, and they don't want to do it because you tell them it's cool, or they don't want to, they don't start, like, I didn't start writing workout programs and a philosophy on, health and fitness for women because I was like, hey, this will make me heaps of money. Yep. I was like, well, it just should be this way. Yeah. Like, women shouldn't be made to feel terrible about the way they look and how they think about health and fitness. You can still eat and train in a way that's enjoyable, look good, feel good, and the whole rest, and you can do it without degrading yourself.
You only uncovered that by being in that world and immersing yourself in that industry and becoming good at it and knowledgeable about what's happening in that space and that industry. And then you started to go, well, I'm seeing this and I want to create my own view, or I have my own view now, and this needs a new solution. And I think there's like a lot of people out there that are asking themselves, I don't know, or saying, I don't know what I want to do, or I don't know what my passion is. They've obviously not done enough things, or they haven't done things, to a deeper level where they've become somewhat good at it and, gained a deeper understanding of what's actually happening in the industry, where you start finding these solutions. It's like, you wouldn't have come up with the idea of an infant, formula that was plant-based and organic without being immersed into that world.
It's an interesting thing, right?
It is.
Because how do you find opportunities?
Yes.
I'm disappointed that I don't have a better word, but you can kind of, there's a fork in the road at the beginning. It's either kind of a conscious or unconscious discovery, right? Yeah. So what I mean by that is that a huge portion of organizations that are started by founders, not corporates, and I'll kind of explain that one. But they're started by founders, not corporates, come by people that have a high proximity to the subject matter that they're in.
Yep.
Right. So a lot of companies that are resolving kind of financial industry problems are coming from bankers. Like a lot of, in my case, I created a service and product for, fitness by being in the industry one way or another, right? However, when you look at a lot of the other kind of gigantic organizations that are built out of corporates, they're they're consciously discovered, very deliberately discovered, there's all these trends happening, this makes sense, right? So they weren't necessarily even in the space, they went to the space to find opportunities. And they're kind of two fundamentally different approaches. The former is normally the individual, it's a first-time founder or sometimes even a second-time founder. The latter is typically, corporates or people that existed in those larger organizations.
There's also a matter, and I'll let you boys speak to it as well, in the aspect of, say, as you were, Toby, you were passionately in the industry that you were working in. And as you said, there was a severe problem, and the problem was women were made to feel a certain way about fitness and the likes of that type of stuff. So you didn't randomly just pop up and just go, been a PT 6 months, there's this problem, going to solve it and make an app, and my exit's going to be 400 mil. Like it doesn't work in any aspect whatsoever like that.
Yeah, we speak that it's that simple.
That's how it's perceived.
But this is the society and coming back, and whether it's about entrepreneurship or kind of achieving the pinnacle of like athletic success, it's that most of society is celebrating the outcome or the end point, right? They're interested in hearing the random funny parts of the origin story, and then they want to hear one difficult, sad time, and then they go, cool, but you got to the end.
Yeah, exactly.
When the reality is, very far from the truth. And again, you look at, I really like athletes. I think they're a great kind of example that it's a little bit easier for people to understand than business unless you've kind of been there, right? LeBron James spends a couple of $1 million a year maintaining his body, health and mind, however you choose to kind of frame that, and that's daily meditation, daily journaling, it's daily eating the right food, it's daily doing the hard training, the technical training, the skills-based training, the fitness training, the rehabilitation, it's all these things. Most of that's boring.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so he's going to go in there and do that. And sure, if a person off the street, went from having none of that and then got to live a couple of days as LeBron, they'd be like, this is amazing. I've got chef-cooked meals, this, that, and the other. But, then when the flavour becomes a bit repetitive and the workouts become a bit repetitive and you've got these few niggles and aches in your body and you're tired and it's 4 a.m. in the morning and you're training and whatever, and then the pressure's on and this and that and the other, all of a sudden it becomes a lot less enjoyable. And you've got to do that 365 days a year, more often than not for like 10 years to kind of get anywhere.
It's these realities that I was so excited to talk to you about, and I think we've consciously not sort of introduced you, talking about your successes, because that's not who you are. That's something that you've achieved, and it gives you validity to talk about what we're talking about today, which I'm excited about. But the thing that I've loved, and I've said to you when we've been training, is like you've gone through this sweat exit. Now you're starting to do other things, and you're collaborating with other business people and founders and stuff, which is so exciting. But every time I hear you on a podcast or what you're writing about on social, it's real shit. And for whatever reason, it's just stuck with me because I feel like no one really talks about the real stuff. So every time I've listened to one of your podcasts, I'm like, oh man, finally someone is actually saying it how it is.
I feel a little bit obliged to,
this is how I'm feeling. And this is why I was excited for us to have this chat. Where I'm like, you've achieved the 1% goal, right? What is exciting is that because you've achieved it, say, for example, me and Sel go, it's possible. So that's fantastic.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that it's
probable.
Correct. Right?
Yeah.
And so I think the exciting thing that I wanted to chat to you about was, what are some of the darkest moments in building these businesses that people that you don't talk about and that would otherwise change someone or protect someone from making the decision to start a business if they're not the right type of person that should be starting a business? Like, what are some things that you can dig deep and sort of remember?
So it's worth contextualizing that everyone's story is different, right? So all of the let's call them kind of like symptoms of entrepreneurship, that might kind of leak out into your life one way or another. They'll kind of be different for everyone, but categorically they're uncomfortable, you know. And so, to rattle off a couple of examples, I like pride myself in my decision-making capability, pride myself on normally having thought things through quite a lot. And normally as a result of that, there wasn't kind of too many like categorical stuff-ups like in the journey, right? But there was still lots of big, bad, kind of hairy ones, but the reality is, to your point, they don't really get talked about. So one that I've shared a little bit about before is, we were trying to raise money for the business. So we were bootstrapped. We'd never raised any capital. I kind of said, we need to get on the path to exit, and a path to exit, raise some money, accelerate growth, and then exit. And so we kind of designed this deal with a particular investor. To get to that point, I'd spent like 3 or 4 weeks, 100 odd meetings with investors and got rejected by 100% of them, right? And you still got to go into all of them with full enthusiasm. But that was like not even the worst part. That was actually relatively straightforward. But like if you just take that, if you just extract that and go, how many times have you walked into 100 meetings back to back for 30 days straight or whatever and been rejected 100% of the time? How many times, if you're a guy, have you walked up to 100 girls in a club or a bar or a restaurant or whatever and been rejected 100 times? Or like as an athlete, have you gone to 100 clubs and tried to fight for that role? Like there's not that many kind of scenarios. Like if you're a jiu-jitsu guy, like did you go to 100 comps and lose 100 times and still show up to the next one?
Yep.
Not likely. Yep. Right? So anyway, to kind of, the icing on the cake here is eventually, we find a potential investor, we do due diligence, spend millions of dollars doing it. We get a couple of days out from the deal, right at the end of a calendar year, and I'm like, look, everyone, go on your Christmas break. By the time you come back, deal's going to be done. We'll have all this capital. I've recruited another 30 or 40 people for the business to kind of set us up to accelerate, the beginning of the following year. And then 36 hours out from when the money is meant to hit the bank for the business to kind of rocket, deal falls through. The next day, I've got to, do a kind of big, group chat with the company. Hello, everyone. Everything I said was wrong. Every single assumption I made was wrong. I'm sorry, I have to let a huge amount of you go. There's going to be a full company restructure. Personally, I just lost better part of $10 million. I've still got to show up and be kind of not necessarily happy, but like a resilient, strong, centered leader. And then the business still has to run. Yeah. Right? Like, so it's not like, we have the bad conversation, everything goes back to normal. It's like, the whole team is bruised. Yeah. Like morale is down, right? Another example would be, part of being kind of in the fitness industry is that everyone has different views on what does work and doesn't work and this and that and the other. Earlier on in the year process, we had a particular person who got really passionate about the fact that what we did was wrong. This went to like hate mail and this and that and the other. And we had, literally tens of thousands of people commenting and abusing our organization online. It's like, as a leader, it's like, you got to come to work every day and say, to the people, on the support desk and marketing, whatever, just, you're doing a great job, guys, keep going. When they're literally getting abused, reading death threats. Like you go home at the end of the day to find death threat letters, like on your doorstep, right? Like, and this stuff sounds so extreme, right? Like, so like, someone who hasn't kind of experienced this would go like, oh my God, that's so hardcore. But it's like, a lot of business owners experience this type of intense stuff. Maybe not death threats, maybe not failed capital raises or whatever, but there's a variety of different things that can go wrong, right? Like I have a client I work with who just signed a deal for tens of millions of dollars worth of distribution, signs it with the person to distribute it, and then manufacturers like can't work with you anymore the next day.
Yeah,
we've had all these.
In different doses. Had all these. Just probably not at the stakes that you have yet. The other thing that within all that you just said that was just making me think of a couple of things is being a business owner. You know how people pride themselves on being a good friend, being a good husband, being a good dad, being a good son, brother, mother, whatever it may be. I can almost assure you they are polar opposites with being a good business owner. Like in the aspect of if you are really, really good at running your business and the likes of that type of stuff, chances are it's pulled you away from being the best dad you could have been. Chances are it's pulled you away from being the best husband or the best friend or the best son. Because if you had the time or if your brain wasn't getting smashed and you're constantly dealing with all this stuff, you probably would have spent more time getting your mum a better present. Or being there for your mum's birthday in the first place. Sometimes you would have missed it.
Remembering to call her.
Sometimes you would have missed it. And it's not because you don't love your mum, obviously. And there's different times of being the dad where you're just like, man, I should have spent more time at the sports carnival or swimming carnival, whatever it may be, or I could have done more here, but my time got pulled. I did the best I could, but
and some of those things are in your control, and some aren't. Right?
Exactly.
Like,
and it's just hard. It's hard in the aspect of just going that you are trying to deliver your best in all formats, but there's the people that really want to go, I'm going to be like the friend that is going to be at every occasion, and I'm never going to miss this, or I'm never going to miss that.
Yeah.
If you are that person, don't do it, because you are going to miss a lot of shit. And if it eats at you and you like super disappointed you didn't make that friend's birthday, or you missed this special occasion that was special for them, but you had something that was super pressing that was life and death in terms of your business, you're probably going to miss that, and you don't want to feel shitty, but you also have to understand that that's what your life is going to be. So it's better to know that than...
It's all priorities, right? And like, I mean... I'll give you another really interesting example. This was quite a jarring moment for me on my journey. So we all think about like our own success, and so we often go like, oh, like, am I winning today, this month, this year? How are we going? Kind of like, what's the next win? Yada, yada, yada. And then we catch up with our friends and family. We want to be able to share that.
Yeah.
Right. And so a lot of people who've kind of been through their own journey have experienced the whole, well, I'm sharing my success with you, but then you get upset about it.
Yeah.
Right. Like a lot of people have experienced that. Right. So I came from like not a lot. I had a pretty like, interesting and difficult, childhood for certain phases. And I met a guy when I was 10 years old he's my longest friend. Right. Like we've been mates forever. When I left home, I slept at his house. Sort of thing, like on the floor, right? When I eventually kind of like moved out and got my own place, his mum and stepdad gave me their mattress because I couldn't afford to buy one.
Yep.
Right? They picked me up from places, and we've done a lot of silly things together. But it was a great relationship. Been mates 20 years, right? Anyway, a couple of years into the journey, we were just sort of starting to become pretty well known, making a little bit of money and this and that and the other and whatever. And we're on the treadmills, so we're in a building I own, in a warehouse, in my own private gym, on my treadmills, right? And we rock up, and we're same age, went to school together and everything. And he goes, what have you been up to, man? And I'm like, oh, just got back from Germany yesterday. Spoke at a conference, at a marketing conference, had like a keynote there. It was 40,000 attendees, probably one of the best, like things I've ever been. Just signed XYZ deal, so on and so forth. And I'm like, oh, yeah, it's been busy, man, been busy. What about you? He's like, yeah, I got fired yesterday. And as the room goes silent for a bit, and like about a minute or two goes by, and he goes, and like we're still walking the treadmill, and he kind of like looks over at me and he goes, you know what, man? He's like, I really love you, but it's really hard being your friend sometimes.
Fuck.
And like, so for me, I'm like, I'm not the sort of guy that has like heaps of friends, especially at this point, a very small friendship circle. This guy's parents have like taken care of me, like literally given me money, a bed mattress to sleep on, all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, not that the tables have turned, but I'm in a very different position. And I'm like, in my head, I'm just like, holy shit, man, like that's really hard to hear. Like I'm not really sure what to respond to that, and like, so a lot of people don't even consider that like, oh yeah, running a business is hard, this, that, the other. It's like, but there's also things outside of it. If you win, it will invariably make other areas of your life more difficult. Even if you show up and you're on the treadmill together going to a workout at the gym.
And isn't it funny, the people that you feel that would be the closest to you, for example, I have a private profile on Instagram and I don't tell anyone where I live. I don't really do anything that would lead to like someone wanting to dig further. But like the people that are the closest to you, as you said, a good friend can still have those feelings, can still have those types of things, and you wouldn't even expect it.
No,
I was really glad that he could be honest about it.
Yeah.
And I even said to him, I was like, man, there's a lot of bravery and courage involved in saying, like, I love you and I want to be really happy for you and I am really happy for you, but you make me feel really small. Not even by anything. And he even said, he's like, you don't do anything. He's like, you're not an outlandish, audacious person. You're not bragging, like you're literally just saying what you did. But he's just like, I feel really small.
Yeah.
And that's like really challenging. And we're still really great mates. Like we have been, for, like I said, for 20 years. But it's like the strain that this experience and this journey puts on some relationships. And a lot of people might go, oh, well, he should be this, that, and the other, and he should be happy for you. It's like, he is happy for me.
Yeah.
I know he's really happy for me. But that doesn't make it any easier for him to look at the relativity between our lives and say, oh, well, yeah, sure, maybe I didn't do the things that you did, but like, wow, that's really hard kind of to face into.
Your success has instead almost exposed his insecurities about his own, self a lot more. Yeah. I can relate to that a lot as well.
There's definitely
that's really difficult. I feel like personally, like I've always been a very outgoing person. I've had lots of friends, and as I grow older and have more experiences, it's becoming quite the opposite. I'm becoming way more introverted, way less friends. Like I would rather sit at home, watch Netflix with my partner and my dog than go out and be amongst people. Like
your values shift materially
very much so.
With both age, like time, age and experience, right? Like it's a real thing, and the business journey kind of massively highlights that. Even if nothing kind of just more practical than I only have X amount of hours.
Yeah.
Like that's a really, so a lot of people kind of go, I've got to work 8 hours, then I've got everything else outside of that.
Yeah.
Whereas a business person goes, I got 24 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. What am I going to do with it?
What am I going to do with it? And this is a really fundamental topic, and you see this in social all the time. Like, I want work-life balance. It's like, well, that statement's wrong. You've already lost.
Yeah.
Like the conversation is already lost if you've said, I want work-life balance. You don't. You want balance.
Yeah.
And you are not happy trading one off for the other.
Yeah.
Which comes back to this whole like the incongruence thing. Like, well, what you're willing to do doesn't line up with what you want.
Yeah.
And who you are doesn't line up with who you want to be, or at least that's what you think.
It's so important to start understanding and reflecting on who you actually are and what your strengths and weaknesses are, and becoming very vulnerable and being really looking internally and like learning who you are. And I don't think a lot of people spend a lot of time trying to understand themselves. I feel like as time goes on, I'm just constantly thinking, who are you, to myself? Are you a good person? Are you a bad person? Have you made good decisions, bad decisions?
And that inner monologue, right, is a fascinating thing. You can interrupt with good questions.
Yeah.
So like a lot of people go like, oh, I'm running a business, and you go, cool, why?
Yep.
And like, oh, I want to achieve A, B, C. And that's normally kind of where the conversation ends. But someone once asked me a fascinating question, and the conversation went like that. What do you want to achieve? And I said A, B, C. And they go, awesome. So earlier in your life, who told you that was valuable?
Uh-huh.
And I was like, wow. Like, because most people go, oh, they value, again, money, status, power. So like, and out of those three, like, which things are you kind of seeking, right? And most people don't want to be honest about that. Like, how many founders go like, oh, I'm doing this for the good of the planet. It's like, you might be, and that's really great. But you also have your own kind of life goals that are disassociated with the outcome of the business, right? As much as some people don't want to transparently admit that.
Yeah.
But,
I heard something, and I'm gonna. It was Gary Vee who said it at the time, and I really resonated with it. Where he was just like, "Sure, we all have these selfish inclinations, but it's like, but mine is, I 51% want to do good for my community, and 49% want to do good for myself." And I was like, "That's awesome. That I can relate to, right?"
Well, and it's a form of honesty, because it's also like what he's kind of, I guess, saying in another way too is like, it's okay to want to win.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay to want to be wealthy.
Yeah.
It's okay to want to have things. And some people say, oh, like, seeking wealth and seeking material assets and whatever is a bad thing. It's like, well, in some cases, yes, in some cases, no. But it's okay to want to improve your current position. There should be no shame associated with wanting to do that. And if entrepreneurship and founding an organization is one vessel that you choose to implement or utilize to achieve that, then so be it.
Yeah. There's
other ones, but that's one. Like, a lot of people used to look at Michael Jordan like, oh, you're such an arsehole. Right. So, well, do you think that when all is said and done afterwards, they're thinking that? No, like, they're thinking it in the moment. But the reality is, like, he just wanted to win, and he knew what he wanted.
Yeah.
Right, and he was happy to be pretty open and honest about it. Yeah. Right. No one looks back now and goes, oh, what he did was bad or wrong or kind of unacceptable. Maybe it was more or less polite or more or less gentle or whatever. But the reality is that most people, coming back to the whole incongruence thing, it's like he knew what he wanted. He identified as that guy in the future, and he set his 24 hours up every day to move him in that direction constantly. So
the person that's listening to this on the other end that is struggling with the things that we were mentioning here, what do you advise that they should be doing, or how do you advise that they should be thinking, or what sort of work that can they do in themselves to understand what path they should go on, or feel good about the path that they're on, and not feel pressured by what media is telling them they should be?
Yeah. So, I mean, first things, write it down. And whatever it is, whatever you're thinking, whatever you're talking about, write it down. Right? And like, that's a lot of people scoff at that because they're like, well, what's the point in that? I'm like, my opinion and purely my opinion only, you know, but forcing yourself to write things down and articulate and re-articulate them makes them clearer and crisper, right? It's, kind of a statement of fact to some degree, right? So whatever it is you're doing, write it down. And so if you're kind of trying to figure out, what should I do? What's the decision that I make? How should I go about this, et cetera, write it down. Mm-hmm. And you'll probably find, because I always say to people, I'm like, you already know the answer. More often than not, you either just haven't got there yet or you're being dishonest with yourself. Yeah. And writing it down kind of removes, like, as you write, you peel the layers down, right? I think coming back to a couple of the points that we were kind of mulling over earlier, where are you today? Define. Where do you want to be? Define. How do you live today? Define. How do you need to live to achieve what you want? Define. And then look for the differences, right? Because it literally is that simple, right? Like, and a lot of people don't necessarily want to believe that, but it's like, identify the things that you have to do that are boring every single day that need to be done to get you where you want to go. But to know what they are, you have to identify where you want to go. And to know that, you have to understand what's different about that to today. It's quite a simple process, but not a lot of people want to commit to doing it. Like, a really great example of that is just how many people have their goals written down?
Not many.
Right? What do you want to achieve? X, Y, Z. Show me. And they're like, well, they haven't written down. It's like, you don't want to achieve it. Mm-hmm. Because if you did, then you would have taken some committed action to represent to yourself that that's true, right?
Sel and I did a podcast recently about strategy and just understanding what it is and talking about it in its simplest form. And what you've just defined there is a perfect roadmap in how you should start looking at your life and decisions to sort of build your own roadmap. And the way I've thought about it is like, a lot of people think they need to start a business to achieve what they want at the end of their roadmap, but they really probably don't. It depends, right? So it's like, you could be more risk adverse and you might not want to be rich. You might just want to have a really comfortable living, and you want to have a family and you want to have a home and maybe some investment properties and things like that over time, but you don't necessarily want to make big risks. You're not looking to change the world or anything like that. You can be a great employee, have great benefits, great salary, great balance, great certainty, and over time, with the right sort of financial strategy, you'll be able to achieve your goals. Probably easier, right?
Absolutely.
And on the other end of the spectrum, it's like, if you're a little bit more like us, where you don't mind grinding it out for whoever, you don't even know the amount of time that you're going to need to grind it out for, but hopefully, if you're making the right decisions at the end, you'll have a huge payout. Yeah. Right?
Yep.
But there's a huge risk involved with that, because you could also potentially end up with nothing. Sure, lots of skills and experience, and hopefully you can, whatever it might be. But that's two different strategies. It's two different roadmaps, right? And so, like, a funny conversation that Sel and I had with our accountants recently was him laughing at me because when I left law, my legal career, I was on a certain salary, and I had not met the salary that I left my legal career on until 8 years into this business, right? The first 3 years of my business, I didn't pay myself a single cent, and it got to the point where I had 6 staff members and still didn't pay myself a cent. And then Sel bought into the business, and he was like, hey, we need to be paying you, and we need to be doing all this sort of stuff and help me build the business, right?
Yep.
But people... I look back at that, and that was just my decision, and there's so many ways to cut the pie and start things, but I was like, I couldn't have scaled this business if I didn't make that decision, and I was lucky to have the support of my partner to be able to help me do that, and that was the only way that I could do this, but I don't think people would do that or make that decision.
And this is a thing, like, so one of the potential risks of people who are quite structured, is that they're like, oh, everything must be done kind of, commercially and framework and this and that and the other, right? But in more environments than not, for the early stages, the first several years of a business, right, you have to do things unscalably.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right? Which is quite counterintuitive, because they're like, oh, well, I want to build an organization that can scale and grow efficiently, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, absolutely. But you got to prove it works first.
Yep.
And to do that, normally you have to do things in a way that's not going to work forever, right? And so the whole like kind of Zig Ziglar, what got you here won't get you there thing kind of applies in reverse too. It's like what will get you there is actually not going to get you here.
Yeah.
And so
now we're at the stage where people are going, no, you need to pay yourselves a proper wage because otherwise this thing won't work.
Yeah,
like,
Well, what's the commercial viability of it?
Yeah,
absolutely. No, it's an interesting piece to think about, and I think coming back to some of the earlier things, right? Like business and the journey of business is incredibly complex. Mm-hmm. Like it's difficult in some ways to reduce it to first principles, but your notion around like having a strategy and whatever, like everyone has to have an individual plan for their life. If you don't have an individual plan for your life, how can you possibly complain that you're not where you want to be?
Yeah.
Because you don't even know where you want to be. Yeah. Because that's part of what would be in the plan, right? Like otherwise it's kind of just like empty sadness. You're kind of sad for no reason. It's learned helplessness also, if you want to think of it that way.
If there's two things you want to get from this podcast, it's to have a plan, it's to start jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah, that's right.
That's a good one.
Man, we could obviously talk for hours and hours, and I would love to do this many times with you, and I'm sure we will, off obviously recording, but hopefully more so on recording. But I would love for you to share with people what you're up to now. You're obviously collaborating with Mark Boris and doing some things. So tell us what you're up to and how we can get involved.
Yeah. So the short version is that after kind of selling the organisation and stepping out of my role, I had an interesting reflective period where, in inverted commas, I kind of had nothing to do. Yeah. Which took me to this place in my mind where I was like, well, what do I actually want to do, and what's life about in a world where I don't have to work all these hours a week and I don't actually have all this stress. And so there's a variety of things that kind of come under that, but I think two things that really stood out to me was, one, like I definitely going to do like more business stuff. Like I always say, like some people are passionate about sport, some people are passionate about food and travel. I'm passionate about business. I'm one of the rare people, like I love it. I love the game. I love the complexity. Every area of it doesn't matter. Like all of it, to me, it's beautiful. And so I will always do that. And then the second thing that came out was I'm like, well, while I'm doing that and while I'm figuring that out, I'm like, I really like other people's success because for a variety of reasons, but, I like to be able to scale my own impact. I'm like, so how can I help other people achieve more, which by virtue scales the impact? But the important extra criteria to that was, I'm like, I really want to make sure I can help other like founders and business owners achieve their goals and be successful in business whilst remaining sane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Because my experience, for a variety of reasons, was uniquely insane. There was a whole bunch of criteria that came together to make it much more complex than a lot of other kind of general business journeys. And so I was like, okay, well, from that experience, I've developed a skill set that allows me to cut through. Yeah. And so I was like, I really want to work with other founders. And so I've been spending a lot of time, kind of advising, founders and startups on how to grow, bits and pieces around how to kind of refine their strategy and a variety of things. I'm working with a company that builds machines for mines.
Amazing.
Like I'm in legal tech, I'm in e-com, I'm in beauty, retail services. It's like there's a variety of different things there, and like that's been a fascinating experience for me and quite a fulfilling one. To be able to kind of see people go like, my weeks actually got easier from working with you. My business is actually growing. I can scale myself and scale the value that I provide to people. So most of my life at the moment, it's like spending time with other founders and helping them kind of win on their own journey, and it's been an incredibly invigorating experience.
Are you still sort of open for that?
Yeah. I mean, obviously I kind of phase in and out of certain organizations based on the time and size and whatever support they need, but
we have so many incredible business owners that listen to this podcast that would do over the 2 million mark sort of number that I'm sure would be very interested in reaching out to you. So how would they reach out to you?
Please, you can find me on LinkedIn or Instagram just by searching Tobi Pearce. So please, I'd love to connect with anyone, and it doesn't matter where you're around the world either. Happy just to provide some help. So please reach out and hopefully we can connect.
Amazing.
And that's cool. The biggest takeaway is the sanity part. If someone's going to take something away from it and wants some help, I'm sure for business owners, it's the aspect of as many a time you probably think you're losing your mind, or you may have lost your mind. Let's face it. Like
we lost our mind a long time ago.
So that for someone that can get advice from you to bring them into alignment, make them feel somewhat sane and normal, that they're going about it the right, or if they're going about it the wrong way, at least helping them get on the right way is like, you can't put a price on that. Like it's near impossible to price on it. Yeah.
And tell us about the sort of collaboration with Mark, or is it like a tour?
Yeah. So Mark and I have known each other for quite a while. I think I was one of the very early on guests on his podcast actually, years ago, and so we kind of reconnected recently, the other side of COVID, and spent some time chatting. And long story short, he's obviously a very successful and very passionate business person, and we're quite aligned on some values around this notion of like educating and supporting entrepreneurs. I think his focus is more Australia, mine's just a bit more general, but educating and supporting entrepreneurs to kind of achieve their goals and dreams. And so he had this idea to kind of set up a tour to run a couple of events in Australia, Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne, where there'll be, myself, him and a couple of other sort of entrepreneurs come along to provide some, some tales, from certain parts of the journey, but then also kind of some advice to like navigate different components of the founder's journey, if you will.
Awesome.
That's early next year, in February, beginning of February. So I'd love to see some people there as well if anyone's listening along.
100%.
For sure.
Thank you so much, brother. Really appreciate it. And hey, look, if anyone wants to hear more about your story, there are so many good podcasts out there that you've recently just done talking about the journey of Sweat, the exit, how you felt after the exit, all these sorts of things, which I found very valuable, and purposefully didn't want to sort of go down that road in this chat and wanted to get a little bit deeper. And I'm sure I'll kick myself listening back to this, wanting to ask more questions, but I'm sure we can do it again. But thanks so much, brother.
No, thanks for having me, guys.
Appreciate it, bro.
No, I loved it, guys. Thanks very much.